Welcome to Cover Book Beat. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. With the 21st anniversary of that other day of infamy, 9/11, coming up as we record this, we should remember that it was a turning point for every American, and not just for first responders, but also for anyone serving in the military. Within months, we went from being a peacetime army to an army at war. Our guest today knows that intimately. Vicki Cody has a unique perspective on this and other pivotal events. She got married 46 years ago. She also became wedded to the Army. The young West Point cadet ultimately rose to be a four-star general and vice chief of staff of the whole Army, and Vicki was there for all of it. And she has detailed that roller coaster of stress, loneliness, sleepless nights, also humor, joys, and eventually resilience that make up her life while her husband's away at war. In a pair of award-winning books, Army Wife and Fly Safe, we're very pleased to welcome Vicki Cody.
Well, thank you, Roger. It's great to be here, and I appreciate you having me on your show today.
Yeah. You graduated from University of Vermont with a BS in education. And did you have any formal training in writing before you began to write?
No, I did not, and I was surprised that it just kind of evolved over time. I never knew that I was going to be a writer, but to tell you the truth, throughout our Army journey, I was either keeping a journal, or my mother and father used to say I would write these long, detailed letters to them from our travels that read like a short story or a book.
Mhm.
And so I think it was always in me, and I think I was always looking at everything around me, processing it, and it was in my mind. I think I was writing it and I didn't know it, if you know it, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Sure.
So no, I did not go to school to become a journalist or a writer. It all happened, I believe. I can kind of trace it back to the events of September 11th, 2001.
Hmm.
As you said, it was a turning point for every American, but certainly for those of us with a loved one or loved ones in the military. And it truly changed the course of my husband's career, our sons, and me. It started me writing, as a result of our sons deploying all the time, and it was kind of, it started maybe a coping mechanism that I was writing down what I was going through. But I also early on realized I wanted to help other families, other parents of soldiers. And my first endeavor with the writing was a small booklet that the Association of the United States Army published, and I wanted it to be free to hand out to all parents of soldiers because I felt that there weren't enough resources out there. So I think it was just by chance that the situation I was in, my husband serving, our, our sons going to combat because of September 11th,
Hmm.
that I started this journey of writing, and the one little booklet for the Army ended up turning into, I wrote the memoir, Army Wife, and then eventually Fly Safe. So I sometimes think that was the silver lining out of all those horrible things that happened that day. I think it led me down this path.
Okay, and I want to mention right there at this point that if you go on Amazon, you'll find both of your books, but somebody also tried to sell one of your pamphlets. And bless his heart, your son Clint posted on there, "Don't buy this. This is available for free." I don't know if you knew that or not, but
Yes, I did. Roger, you do your research well.
yeah.
Yes, every once in a while that happens, and our son is real quick to, he's better with social media than I am. He's always checking things. But yes,
But
that pamphlet or 64-page booklet is free of charge to anyone that wants it. AUSA.org. You can download it for free, or they will send you copies. So
just wanted to mention that fact because your sons Clint and Tyler both went on to follow your husband's footsteps, and not just generally, but very specifically into the special kind of aviation, and
right.
that shows they come from a good family, I have to say. Um,
Well, thank you.
you've also mentioned a children's book. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh, well, that never got published.
Oh, okay.
um, yeah, that was never published. So maybe that was my first dabbling in
Mhm.
in writing. It was going to be a children's book about Army life, oh gosh, that was like 30 years ago. I knew nothing about writing, kind of put that aside and put it on hold and didn't even think about writing again until, well, when my husband was in Desert Storm. I kept a journal, and actually, that's what the book Fly Safe, my newest memoir, is
Mhm.
about. That's based on his letters that he wrote me and my journal. Um, so yeah, that book never got off the ground. I think it was timing too. It just wasn't meant to be. And
Mhm.
then, like I said, just out of stress and the anxiety of our sons deploying, and just to give the audience a little bit of background on that. Um, when September 11th happened, my husband was the commanding general of the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And we had one son in flight school, helicopter flight school, and the other son was at Texas A&M. So at that point in time, I had gotten very used to, pretty comfortable with Army life, my husband coming and going. There weren't deployments back to back, but every so often he did deploy somewhere. But I was pretty familiar with that world. And when our sons, each of them early on said they wanted to go into the Army, they wanted to fly helicopters, I was proud. I was excited for them. I didn't think about the dangers of it. I don't know why, but it wasn't until September 11th and 2 days, literally 2 days after, it was September 13th, our son that was in flight school called his dad's office and said, Dad, if you're going to combat, I want to go with you. And so get me to the 101st as soon as you can. So as soon as he got out of flight school, Clint came to the 101st. That would have been early 2002, and in January. Within 2 months, Clint was on a plane headed to Afghanistan. And that was when my world kind of came crashing down that, oh, wow, our sons aren't just signing up to be helicopter pilots and this is all like really fun and great, just like their dad. He was going to combat. He was 24 years old, right out of flight school. I guess I just didn't see that coming.
Mhm.
And then from then on, it was back. He went to Iraq. Then our younger son joined the 101st, went to Iraq. Both of them, twice they were over there together. And so we're talking about 9 deployments later. It was during that time that I thought, you know what? I've got to write this down. I've got to help other people. I got to get myself through this. So it wasn't just, oh, our sons decided to do this during peacetime. They entered the military just like hundreds of thousands of other young men and women that joined. They weren't drafted. These kids joined after
Mhm.
September 11th and said, you know what? Send me. I'm ready to go. And that says a lot about this generation of youth that continues to sign up for the military, knowing that there's still deployments going on
Oh,
everywhere.
yes.
So I have to kind of stress the fact that that's what I was going through that led me to do all of this.
And we should tell our listeners that Army Life, the first one, recounts everything from your courtship up to through Dick's whole career in retirement, and then Fly Safe adds a lot more depth and quotations from the journal and letters from Dick, which he's a pretty darn good author as well.
I know. I'm amazed, first of all, um, that he wrote me. I had 94 letters that
Hmm.
I had saved all these years that were just sitting in this box. And I probably did not look at those letters over the last 30 years, except a few of them I looked at for reference when I was writing the first book that encompassed everything, my whole Army life. And when I wrote Fly Safe, I decided to focus just on that 1 year that he was gone, or close to a year,
Hmm.
and using his letters. Anyway, when I read over the 94 letters, when I decided to try to make it into a book, I couldn't believe how he wrote and how intimate the letters were, as far as his feelings, what was going on in the combat zone. These were things that probably one on one he didn't share with me day to day, but in a letter he did, and that's why I thought there was a really good story in there. And then with my journal entries, the reader gets an idea of what it was like for the families back home. And then, of course, I weave it all together with narrative. But yeah, it's funny because more than once in more than one letter, he said something to the effect about my letters to him. He said, Vicki, you're a good writer. You should be an author someday. And again, this came out of the blue. Like I wasn't thinking about being a writer. I never dreamed I would write a book that had to do with his letters in my journals, but it all came together. And I think it makes for a great, a very readable and relatable story.
It does. In fact, one of the things that surprised me when I learned that you didn't have a whole batch of books prior to this was how smooth and how flowing the writing is. It's a very easy read. I want to suggest anybody that's interested, please grab a couple of copies because you will enjoy it. Also, it's valuable that this is no kind of whitewash for what the families of active duty personnel have to go through. You're honest about all the interruptions, the moving, the spoiled plans, the dislocations, and the emotional turmoil. Was it hard to bare your soul for those aspects of the book?
No, it it came easily. I don't know why, and that's why I think I was meant to do this. It
Mm.
just it comes out of me, and it's only like say the night before my book gets published, both books. I would say to my husband, "Oh my gosh, what have I done? This is going to go out there. People are going to read it." And I would have just a little hint of, "Oh my gosh, did I put too much out there?" But otherwise, I tend to be a very open book when I relate to people, when I talk to people, and that's how I write. And I want people to know, along with all the joys and the pride and the great moments and blessings that I've had in this great life. I do want them to see that it wasn't always fun and games. There was stress, anxiety, fear. There were times when I wanted to quit. I would say to Dick, that's it. I'm done. I don't want to be an Army wife anymore. This is too hard. But each time I got through those challenges or got over that next hurdle, I felt like it was so empowering because, quite frankly, I feel like I can do or handle just about anything. There's not much that I fear in life, quite frankly. It's like I feel like I've been through quite a bit, certainly not as bad as what some people experience. My husband, our sons always came home safe. They have not suffered from any psychological, traumatic, post traumatic stress. So I know I'm very lucky and very blessed. But aside from that, just the day to day stresses and rigors of Army life, I think shaped me, made me the strong woman I am, made me feel like I can handle pretty much whatever comes my way. And most spouses that I talk to include our two daughter in laws, at the time you think, I can't get through this, I don't want to get through it. But they agree that when you come out of it, you finish a deployment, your husband comes home, life is so good and so sweet. You appreciate everything you have because of what you've been through, and you're stronger for it.
Absolutely. It also occurred to me while reading the first book that in several places you talk about crying alone so as not to frighten your sons. When the book came out, were they shocked to discover that?
Oh no, no, and I always have our sons and my husband read the book before it ever goes to
Okay.
print.
Okay.
No, and I guess they know me so well. They know, and I do remember one time when our son Clint was deployed to Iraq, and he had been through quite a lot of combat. He'd finally settled in, and this was early in the war. And my husband was back at the Pentagon, and he came home and told me that Clint was going to be extended, like another 9 months. And this was after he'd been to Afghanistan, and the war is raging, and we know that our other son is going to be headed over there too.
Hmm.
That was probably one of my lowest points. And Clint called us that evening, And he said, Dad, I just heard that we're staying on here in Iraq. And I got on the phone and I started to cry. And Clint was so funny. He said, Mom, practice what you preach. You always tell the parents not to cry on the phone with their son. And it was so funny to hear him. I said, you're right, Clint. But I said, you know what? I'm having a really rough time with this. But it was like he kind of diffused it when he said, Mom, practice what you preach. You're not supposed to cry. But yeah, there are many times when I was crying quietly while I was talking to them, and you can't help it. You love your kids, and it's hard to let them go.
Yeah. At one point, you talk about he found me in my rubber gloves washing windows, cleaning what I always do when I get scared. That's because it's something that is both useful and you can control.
Mhm.
I think most everybody does that to a certain extent.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I always would find something like that cleaning and that was that was the first low point. When we found out Clint was going to Afghanistan when he had just come to the 101st and that time my husband comes home from work and he says, Vicki, I'm sending the rest of Clint's unit. He's going to combat like tomorrow. And I said, well, you're going with him, aren't you? And he said, no, they haven't called for the headquarters. It's just Clint's Apache battalion.
Yeah.
And that was when I ripped off the rubber gloves, threw them on the floor, and I stomped off and I said, I didn't sign up for this. And the thing is, it is like so naive of me at that point in time. What did I think was going to happen? It's like I did sign up for this.
Yeah.
That was the harsh reality. And but yeah, that's funny that you picked up on that. That
Yeah.
was one of those low points too when I wanted to quit.
You you moved, well, how many times? Is it 18
I think it was
times?
18 times in 33 years.
Do you have any moving tips for people?
With each move, we got a little bit more organized. Um, but it was, well, and, in some ways, I think it was a little bit easier because if we were moving to an army post, you would get there and the movers would come, they'd unload your things, and it was very stressful. But the neighbors would all come out and welcome you. And they were people that were just like you. They had maybe just moved there the week before or the year
Mhm.
before. People were always coming and going on army posts. So you didn't feel new for too long. And I noticed that when we retired in Northern Virginia, just outside of DC, when my husband retired, and we moved into our new neighborhood, and here we are, in our late 50s, almost 60, no kids at home. And it's like, how do you meet neighbors? A few neighbors came by, but it was so different than those army moves. So I have to say, the army moves weren't that hard. And the advice, I don't know. It's like I was always saying, Dick, I'm going to be more organized this move so it's easier on the other end. And then sure enough, it wasn't easy.
Oh, our aspirations are always larger than our
Exactly.
follow through. Um, there have been some real upsides to all of this, including you got some good friends out of this, some which came and went over the years, but you also met some people. Tell me about Winona Judd.
Oh, I know, I know. Yes, we've been very lucky, and Winona Judd is from Kentucky originally. Lives outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Again, this happened because of September 11th. My husband, in the 101st, commanding it. She called about a week or two after September 11th, out of the blue, called my husband's office and said, Sir, I was born and raised in Kentucky. I know you command that big post up there at Fort Campbell, and I want to know what I can do to help you and your soldiers right now, because they were already starting to talk in terms of deployments.
Mhm.
And my husband said, "Well, Miss, if you'd like to come up to Fort Campbell, we'll take you on a tour. And would you want to do a concert?" And so it started with that. She came up and did some free concerts for the soldiers before they were leaving. And then she brought her mother, Naomi, who recently passed away, very
Mhm.
tragic. But Naomi would come, they would pray with the soldiers, they'd see them off, and somehow a friendship formed. And over the years, I mean, she was there when our sons deployed, she would come when at their welcome homes. It's been a wonderful relationship with her that continues today. And we support her in any way. She supports us. And she became a true fan. She had never been around military people in all her career and all the things she had done. And she always told us that we gave her this window into a whole other way of life and a way of selfless service. And so she's just one of those that's always ready to help in any way.
Bless her heart for that.
Yeah, she's
Absolutely.
great.
Also, you've been at the White House and presidents and such.
Yeah.
And by the way, thanks for putting photos in there because I love seeing all of those photos, family photos and photos
Mhm.
with famous folks and whatnot. But yeah,
Yeah, it's been an exciting ride, and yes, I had the pleasure of meeting Barbara Bush early on. That was during Desert Storm, and then President George Bush during just after September 11th. He and Laura Bush came to Fort Campbell to visit us, and very exciting. And throughout my writings in my books, I try not to, I try to offset. I don't want it to be, oh, wow, they got to meet some really famous people and they lived the high life, because it was like the next day after we were with President Bush and Laura. I was serving Thanksgiving dinner to about 30 soldiers at my house that were guarding the house, and I wanted to do something for them. So it was constantly this wonderful life and these experiences where one day I might be with President Bush and the next day I'm just with soldiers like any other army wife. And I have to say that along the way, my husband and I have met so many wonderful men and women that serve this nation that are just ordinary Americans that signed up for this. And I can't say that, meeting the famous people, sure, it's fun at the time, but it's the soldiers that remain in our hearts. If you want to know the truth, the ordinary, everyday people that sacrifice so much.
absolutely, absolutely. And how much the culture has changed. You talked about attending a course for spouses on etiquette and protocol with the white gloves
Yes.
and calling cards and all of that. That's like the edge of a way of life that's long gone, I think.
Oh, I know it is, and now, with our sons still serving, and we have our daughter-in-laws, and we have four little grandsons. My husband and I now see Army life through their eyes, and we see the changes, and we stay very involved. We do a lot of work with wounded warriors and their families, and so we still kind of have our finger on the pulse of what's going on out there, and it really has changed. I can't say it's better or worse, but certainly there's no more white gloves, and not every spouse takes on the role of if it's the commander's spouse. Not everybody participates like we did in the old days. if
Yeah.
if your husband was the commander, you pretty much automatically took on that role as commander's wife, and you led the family support group. Nowadays it can be anybody. A lot of spouses choose not to maybe go on a certain assignment with their husband. More and more spouses work, and so they've it has changed with the times, and probably for the best. Um, but yes, it's certainly a different army than what we came up in.
And I'm getting close to the closer, but I have to ask your own changes. What have you experienced? You probably didn't know when you were graduating from college that you were going to end up being a pilot as well.
Oh, I know. I know when I think about the opportunities that were in front of me and my husband, just because, we were both from small town Vermont. He's from Montpelier, I was from Burlington. We fell in love, dated for 6 years, and actually postponed our wedding at one point because he was deploying. He ended up in Guam, handling the evacuation of Vietnam, all the refugees. So that was my first indicator that my life was not going to be exactly like my friends and family back home in Vermont. But it was like we left Vermont and we started out in Hawaii and moved to all these wonderful places. And every step of the way, I feel like I took advantage of what was offered to me, either through Army courses that they would offer the spouses, or I felt like I was always trying to learn about my surroundings. And through that, I was given all these great opportunities. And my husband became a pilot. And then we bought a small plane. And I thought, well, maybe I should learn to fly. So I became a private pilot at the age of 32. Certainly, I think if we had stayed in Vermont, and I don't know that we would have done all these different things, the things that we've done. So I always credit Army life to opening up all these doors for us.
Okay, well, we'd like to open the doors for people who will listen to this and loved what they heard and want to find out more. Tell us about your online presence and where people can find your book.
Okay, so I have a website, Vicki Cody, VICKICODY.com. You can follow me on my website, and you can read about my books and everything I've done and order them. My books are available on Amazon, but also check out your indie bookstores. Give them a chance too. They can order any of my books, all the major retailers, Target, Barnes and Noble. So pretty much wherever books are found. I'm on Facebook, Vicki Cody. I keep it pretty simple, and I don't do Twitter and all the other things. Maybe someday I will, but right now I'm on Facebook, so you can follow me there, and my website.
Okay, our guest today, Vicki Cody, the books Army Wife and Fly Safe. We're very pleased to have you. Thank you so much for being with us and being generous with your time.
Thank you, Roger. It was a pleasure. Thank you.